Hey, so I'm recapping Grimm, Season 4, Episode 2, called Octopus Head. And of course, this episode is referring to this Vessin. He's not very pretty, but he's got a cool superpower. He takes people's memories by, if you remember from last week, putting his tentacles in the back of their head and sucking all the memory out of them. He's this Vessin spy who's going around taking scientific information from these people who are all working on the same project. Eventually, Nick and Hank find this out while working in the precinct and by talking to other victims and other police officers who've dealt with these victims. And Trubel, of course, is the only Grimm in town, which means that she is on stalker mode. She's following this guy, being a spy herself, in a hotel room, and she's noticing how he's changing his look. He dyed his hair, got glasses, and he's trying to get other people in order to steal their memories for his clients, which gets her in trouble, because by the end of the episode, she's gets attacked. He figures out that she's following him. He's ready to take her memories, but she's fighting, even with her hands behind her back. I mean, she's like a tough fighter, man. And so he's ready to take her memories, and he starts with his tentacles, and he starts sucking. And I'm like, alright, it's done. Trubel's lost her memories. Goodbye. This is the end of Trubel. But then Nick and Hank show up, at the very last second, which is crazy because, he's definitely been sucking the memories out of her for a good 5 minutes before they show up, so you'd think that she would be done. But no, it doesn't work. Maybe because she's a Grimm, or just because he didn't get to finish, and so that means it doesn't work. But he gets all these memories of her Grimm experiences, and he's terrified. He starts screaming and holding his head. I guess Gesessin just can't take the memories of Grimm's, and it's too overwhelming, it's too terrifying. So luckily Nick shows up and he says, Trubel, are you okay? And she's totally got her memories, she's fine, got a little blood, but you know what, put a band-aid on it. But it's really funny because right afterwards, you'd think the episode is over once the memory guy gets caught, and he's sitting in jail, screaming. It's okay, boom, he's in jail, and he's gonna torture himself with Trubel's memories. Unfortunately, earlier in the episode, Nick had a talk with Chavez, the FBI agent, and she was interrogating him, and she's being really mean about it, she's very implicative, and she's, suggestive, and Nick is just not having it, he's just keeping his cool, like a good detective does. But unfortunately, she vogues, and since he's not a Grimm anymore, she can't see it in his eyes, and so she's like, okay, so he's not the Grimm. So Chavez tells her cohorts that, okay, Nick's not the Grimm, but I know who is. And so at the end of the episode, when Trubel's on her bike, or on Juliette's bike, she gets dragged into this black van, which is driven by Chavez. So Sean Renard, at the very end of the last episode, he was declared dead. And everyone was saying, he's not dead, he's not dead, he's not dead, and he's not. Because his mother comes, and I totally predicted that, and she takes this two-headed snake, and it goes into his heart and her heart, and the snake sucks venom or blood or something. It's some Hexenbeast, Zauberbeast thing, and he's okay, because then he wakes up, she faints, but she's fine, and the snake dies. So good news is Sean Renard is revived thanks to his mother, who looks far too young to be his mother, by the way. Sean Renard knows that Nick is no longer a Grimm because he tells him that the thing smashed, it's gone. So hopefully we can get the help of a Hexenbeast to fix this mess. However, some people don't want it to be fixed, such as Juliette, because she goes over to the spice shop where Monrosalee have been buried in books for the past few days, and they're exhausting every option and reading every text, trying to find a solution, trying to reverse the steps that Sean Renard took, but they realize that they're kind of coming up empty-handed, but they're still determined to fix this because, Nick's their best friend and they want to help. So Juliette shows up and she says, maybe you shouldn't be helping because it's kind of great now that he's not a Grimm anymore, because being a Grimm made his life extremely complicated and my life extremely complicated. So maybe we should just see how this goes. And what she's really saying is, I'm glad that he's not a Grimm anymore. She's like, maybe we should just wait, but no, she's had it with the Grimm stuff. They've trashed the house too many times. But Monroe says, yeah, we're still gonna keep looking, and Rosalie completely agrees. So let's skip to Vienna. Alexis Denisov is playing an extremely great, convincing villain, and threatening, and just really articulate in everything he says, and he's fantastic. I can't say enough good things about him. Great, I love Prince Viktor. But he's kind of mean in this episode, because Adalind, who's like extremely desperate, comes to him and she says, "Where's my baby?" And he locks her in a cellar designed to keep hexen beasts inside. And so he says, "You can huff and puff all you want, but you ain't blowing this house down." And I'm like, wrong Besson. That's definitely Blue Pod. But it was funny. Great line. So his plan is to keep her there while he has people confirming that Nick Burkhart lost his powers by shagging Miss Hexenbeast. He also wants to torture her until she gives up every name of the Resistance, because he wants to find the baby and he wants to take down the Resistance while also taking down Nick Burkhart. And so far his plan is working, because he's got the Hexenbeast locked up, he's got a way to get information, and he's got Verrot everywhere, except for, the guy who got killed by Trubel. Chavez is not the only one suspicious of Trubel. Wu is also, because he saw her on security camera footage of one of the suspects that they were working on a previous case, that double homicide. And so he's like, "Oh, well, she decapitated guy, and he saw the book in her room, and she's living with Nick now, so what's up with this?" So he goes over to Nick's house to try to find out what's happening, but then Nick goes into this huge shock thing. Like, his head starts hurting, and he's, like, screaming, and then something happened with the spell with Adalind, because as she's in Viktor's prison, and Nick is in his home with Juliette, he starts screaming, and he's, like, their brains kind of swap for a second, so he sees what Adalind sees, the floor of the cage with little rats scurrying, and Adalind can see Juliette and Wu in his home. We know that there's a connection between Nick and Adalind at this point. He got back into his body, but, something's going on with this spell, so we're gonna need this Hexen Beast help, and maybe Monrosalee's help, because seriously, this is like deep things that are super Vessin spell potion-y that we're gonna have to figure out. So we're gonna get some help next week with Nick's problem. Hopefully Sean Renard's mother will have some answers. Hopefully we'll find out what happens to Trubel, if she's okay. But we got a lot of stuff to deal with. I'm really liking the progression of this season, because it's a lot like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when the early seasons were like every single episode was a different bad guy and they had to fight off, a different person every single episode. But now we're getting more arced seasons. There's like one bad organization or a bad villain that you see over consistent episodes. It's going to be really fun to see where this goes with the rest of the season.